Hello and welcome back to my humble show. I have something to show you. Here it is.
I do have one very affirmative statement to make. We won.
But I didn't lose. I got the votes. But we won't know exactly how many because of how they cheated.
I did win my election. I just didn't get to have the job.
We were robbed of an election.
Just using the word rigged, using the word steal. Do you think it's dangerous going into 2020?
I don't, because we can actually back it up. And so in response to what I believe was a stolen election, and I'm not saying they stole it from me, they stole it from the voters of Georgia.
Ooh, they stole it from the voters of Georgia. Remember Georgia? That one place where Joe Biden claimed that Jim Crow 2.0 was alive and well. Not just Jim Crow. Jim Eagle, as he referred to it. Yeah. That was nonsense. In addition to all of that, he essentially led to the boycotting of the MLB All-Star Game at the time. This was a couple of years ago. And the run-up to the second election, which she lost in embarrassing fashion. But they were really pushing all the buttons there, trying to propel her to victory. After she claimed that she won her first campaign despite having lost it. I mean, she lost twice, and now she doesn't talk about it too much anymore. And I wonder if that's because she was actually lying in the first place, or maybe she just lost in such embarrassing fashion that she finally came to terms with the fact that she's the loser, as is Donald Trump, technically speaking. But in her case, would you say that it's comparable to Donald Trump's case? And I'm asking this because a lot of people have been comparing them lately after Donald Trump was indicted by Fani Willis of Georgia because he conspired against the results of the election by questioning them. They call him the big liar. But what about her? Was she a big liar? Was she an election denier? I mean, obviously she was, as you can hear here.
Someone outside asked if I'm ever going to concede. The answer is no.
This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper.
And by the way, that's a lie right there. She said she was never going to concede. Well, she conceded. Some might say she just changed her mind. Or well, the first election wasn't legitimate, but the second one was. I mean, frame it however you want, but when the second one rolled around, the second one that she lost, that's when all of the arguments were being made about how the state was systemically racist because they were passing voter laws and promoting voter ID. You know, we were told that black people couldn't get to this place or that place. They can't register to vote. They don't have IDs. Black people don't have IDs. They can't get from point A to point B, apparently, even though obviously Stacey Abrams and anyone else who wanted to vote would have been able to vote. But I don't recall seeing anything less than a record-breaking turnout of black voters in Georgia, despite the Jim Crow rhetoric. Yeah, Joe Biden was literally going to Georgia and giving speeches about how racist the state was being. But so much for that. It didn't propel her to victory. And here we are now, a couple of years later, although several years after she initially denied the results of her election, the big liar that she was. As you see here by the caption of RNC Research, here are 5 straight minutes of Georgia Democrat Stacey Abrams denying the results of her 2018 election loss. And I'm not saying that you couldn't put a longer compilation of clips of Donald Trump denying the election of 2020 together. But are they birds of a feather? Do they flock together? Well, the latter part, not so much. But let me know in the comments below if it's comparable, if it's equatable. I guess she didn't take quite as much legal action before the election as she did after. She did take some legal actions involving lawsuits and such. But yeah, she she was on board with all the claims that the Biden administration was making, to the point where it led to the boycotting of the Major League Baseball game, meaning the baseball game was moved from Atlanta to the detriment of black communities and their business, their source of income, to Denver, Colorado, a state which had pretty much the exact same voter laws and even less of a black population. Yeah, that was one of the funniest things I've seen in regards to Joe Biden and his campaigning. But as for Stacey Abrams and her campaigning, would you compare it to Donald Trump's? Would you equate it? And would you say that if he is going to be indicted, she should be indicted as well? And if so, for what exactly? Or maybe you just argue that neither one of them should be indicted. That's kind of where I stand on this, because whether they're lying or not, the point is that we can't really prove it either way in either case. And so therefore it's a crime of unknown motive, right? In Donald Trump's case, they've deduced him to part of a criminal enterprise, violating RICO law. Notice how in D.C. There were co-conspirators, but none of them were indicted, at least not yet. But in Atlanta, in Fulton County, I should say, in Georgia, Stacey Abrams' home state, RICO law was applied, and therefore, because it fell under the realms of criminal enterprise arguments, criminal enterprise premise, well, the other co-conspirators had to be indicted. So there are 19 defendants in Fani Willis's indictment of Donald Trump. Yeah. Threw them all under the bus. Because of a phone call and the desires to find votes to secure a win for Donald Trump, which did not happen. He was not able to propel himself to victory. So now, looking back at this, and Stacey Abrams,
I will not concede because the erosion of our democracy is not right.
People are going to make you mad. They're going to hurt your future. They're going to steal your election.
It was not a free and fair election. I think the election was stolen from the people of Georgia.
I believe it was stolen from the voters.
Thousands of Georgians had their voices stolen because they were not able to cast ballots, and they cannot be guaranteed that their votes will be counted in 2020 if we don't do this right.
Would you say that she should be indicted as well? Here's an article, an old article from the New York Times, with a very glowing image of her in all her glory. And a headline: Why Stacey Abrams is still saying she won. So this is an article from 2019. I have one more article to pull up after this. Let me read just a little bit of this, as much as I can stomach. Despite being the first black female nominee from a major party to run for governor of any state, Georgia's Stacey Abrams surely couldn't have anticipated that losing her election bid in controversial fashion to the Republican Brian Kemp would have catapulted her to the heights of the Democratic Party. Now she faces some temptingly plausible next steps, which could include, at least if you ask Charles Schumer, the Senate minority leader, an Abrams run for Senate. Joe Biden reportedly considered the 45-year-old as his running mate, an idea she quickly dismissed, potentially in favor of something even bigger. Imagine her running for president. A decision she may have made by the time you read this. If people I respect legitimately think this is something that could be so, Abrams said about the possibility of a challenge for the country's highest office. And it's not my mom and sister saying you should do this, then I owe those people the courtesy of thinking it through. So that's all kind of besides the point. The point is, the question is, why Stacey Abrams was still saying she won. And yet it's all sugar-coated, and they start things off. David Marchese starts things off by talking about how she was being celebrated by the Democrat Party after claiming that she had an election stolen from her. Interesting how that works. When Donald Trump claims that an election is stolen from him, they look for every opportunity to throw the book at him, to lock him up. Lock him up, lock him up. How ironic. And believe me, I see him as a hypocrite as well. But when Stacey Abrams or other Democrats, such as Hillary Clinton, that's a story for another day, claimed that elections were stolen, the Democrats wanted to, well, appoint them to even higher positions. Go figure. Go figure. So, hypocrisy to say the least on so many sides of the issue here. But I want to pull up a different article, a more recent article, this one from Newsweek. Why Stacey Abrams was not indicted in Georgia like Trump. This one is by Tom Norton. More specifically. Scrolling down. Donald Trump's fourth indictment connected to an alleged criminal conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election results has led to accusations that figures in the Democratic Party should face similar charges. On Monday night, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis announced that the former president and his allies are accused of a total of 41 charges, with each defendant accused of violating the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO Act. This is now the fourth indictment Trump has faced this year, bringing the total charges against him to 91. Trump denies all wrongdoing and has pleaded not guilty to all the accusations against him in the other three cases. So, in two of those cases, he's being indicted, he's being prosecuted for claiming that the election was stolen from him, essentially. Of course, there are varying degrees of counts of charges against him, whether it's conspiracy or inciting this thing or that thing. But essentially it all rests upon the notion that he was lying in his claims that the election was stolen. But in her case, no one really even seems to care. At least not the people who want Donald Trump to be locked up. I mean, I guarantee you that in Georgia's gubernatorial elections, Fani Willis voted for, you guessed it, Stacey Abrams. I can almost guarantee you that. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would bet money on that. So, in other words, she would be voting for an election denier only to turn around and lock an election denier up. Or at least attempt to. That's what she's attempting to do now. Her and her grand jury. I don't really like any person involved in this. I'm not a big Trump fan. I'm not a big Abrams fan. I voted for Trump. I would never vote for Abrams, but I'm not a fan of either one of them at this point. I'm just not. So I'm trying to be as balanced and unbiased as possible and really think this through. But at the end of the day, I think it's a bunch of partisan political nonsense. I don't think the case against Trump is fair here. I'm not saying that she should be prosecuted if he's going to be prosecuted. You can't always go for a turning the other cheek approach, because you might get the crap slapped out of you for an eternity if you always turn the other cheek. But at the same time, like, somebody has to do the right thing first. We can't just exchange wrongdoing for wrongdoing. I mean, prosecution for prosecution. And obviously she's never going to be prosecuted, which is fine. I don't even know that their actions are equatable. It's just that if the entire problem, or the entire premise of the problem, is that the legitimacy of elections and election results shouldn't be questioned, then Democrats are no better from Stacey Abrams to Joe Biden. Because whether it be in Georgia or in the country as a whole, pretty much all of them are guilty of denying elections. Again, just ask Hillary Clinton. So where's the line between freedom of speech and too much of a reach? Where as in Donald Trump's case, they would claim that he was committing electoral illegalities. Where's the line? And do you buy it when they say that he was acting illegally to the point where it was no longer an issue of freedom of speech and whether or not he was lying? I just think that the only way I can see in both cases involving the election, in D.C. and in Georgia, right now for Trump, all of the conspiracy claims and illegality claims rest upon the notion that he was lying and therefore must have been conspiring. But that's not proven. That's not. So I don't think they're all that different in the legal sense. Sure, Donald Trump took different actions, but there are legal pathways for those actions. It's just that if he took them dishonestly and attempt to steal an election in his own right, which he didn't actually believe had been stolen from him, that's when it gets messy. And that is possible, but I'm still waiting for the proof of that. All right, so let me read the rest of this and then move along. After the indictment was posted, some conservative commentators began to say Stacey Abrams, the 2018 and 2022 Democratic gubernatorial candidate from Georgia, where Trump was indicted, should face similar cruelty. Or scrutiny. Cruelty. Yeah, that's what Republicans would say is happening to Donald Trump. And in a sense, I don't necessarily disagree. It's definitely scrutiny. Maybe even cruelty. And no, I don't even want to vote for him. I never say never, but I wish he wasn't even running. All right, so conservative pressure groups, that's interesting terminology. Libs of TikTok wrote on X, formerly Twitter, on August 15, 2023. In a post viewed 430,000 times, when is Stacey Abrams getting indicted in Georgia for attempting to overthrow election results? The post included 2 articles by Fox News about Abrams saying she won the election and not conceding the result. So, I think that tweet by Libs of TikTok, and I did see it at the time, was made a little bit sarcastically. Like, okay, if you're in favor of locking up election deniers, then what about Stacey Abrams, since she's literally the failed governor of the state which you're prosecuting Donald Trump in? I don't know that the point was that she should be locked up so much as it was that, according to your own standard, you on the left, you Fannie Willis, she should be. If it's ultimately just about who is lying about elections, I'd say, considering she isn't claiming the election was stolen at this point, she's actually less consistent than Donald Trump has been. Which is evidence in and of itself, at least to a certain extent, that she may have very well been lying in the first place. Right? See what I'm saying? And even if she still is claiming that the election was stolen from her, as she did for so long, well, so is Donald Trump, and you're going after him. Maybe she didn't make phone calls asking people to find votes, but does it really matter if it's a crime of conspiring and it starts with the motive, and then all the claims that you make afterwards are based on that, and then they're all supposedly incitement of violence? Right? When Donald Trump lied, or maybe not even lied, but when he denied, we were told that it was incitement of violence automatically. But in her case, not so much. she was considered for vice presidential nomination. Breitbart's Joel Pollack made a similar point on August 15 of 2023 in a post viewed 149,800 times, arguing if it's a crime in Georgia to claim falsely that an election was stolen, how is Stacey Abrams not in prison? So Newsweek's fact-check team examined whether there was any merit to the claims, and we'll see what they have to say. We'll see if they can keep that same energy. Before I finish this off, let me finish this off. I was uploading a video about Joe Biden's Robert Peter pseudonym. Yeah, interesting stuff. Thanks to the House Oversight Committee. Let me just publish this video really quickly. Whoops, don't want to schedule it. I want to make it public right here, right now. And there we go. And now you can go watch that after you're done watching this, if you want to. If not, that's okay too. I'll forgive you. What did Stacey Abrams do? In 2018, Democrat Abrams ran against Republican Brian Kemp to be governor of Georgia. She narrowly lost to Kemp, but refused to concede at the time, as we have already seen.
What happens to you happens nationally, and we see whoever wins the Democratic nominee. If they say, actually, I can prove that there's a number of votes in every state and that the same thing that you just described happens in multiple states, should they concede?
I do not think we should concede an election until we know the results of an election. I still fundamentally believed it could be fair. And that's just not how life works. If it looks like it's cheating, it probably is.
Oh, really? If it looks like it's cheating, it probably is. Stacey Abrams' words, not mine. YouTube, don't take my video down. So what if Donald Trump says that? People don't keep that same energy. At least people on the left don't. And don't overreact if you're on the right. Just be reasonable. Be consistent. All right, so Newsweek previously reported that Abrams accused Kemp, who was serving as Georgia's Secretary of State, of deliberately keeping over 1 million Georgians from casting ballots by improperly removing them from the rolls. So she was making these claims despite the fact that they had quite an unprecedented turnout, and it only grew during the next election, even though that was after all the claims of racism and voter suppression and, Jim Crow 2.0 / Jim Eagle. The two were separated by fewer than 60,000 votes, and Abrams initially refused to concede amid allegations of widespread voter suppression. Kemp, in charge of overseeing elections as Secretary of State, denied the accusation. I mean, that's kind of how it went in Arizona. And now we have Kari Lake still claiming that she won her election there, her gubernatorial election. Yeah, interesting how that works. Politicians these days. While she accepted that Kemp would take office, the Democratic nominee also filed a lawsuit alleging that the state had violated voters' constitutional rights. A federal judge in late September 2022 ruled against Abrams' claims. So even after the second loss, she was still pushing the notion, even in a lawsuit, that she had been robbed. But in her case, they say, oh, she accepted that Kemp would take office. So what about Donald Trump? Are you saying that he was in there throwing fists? In their fisticuffs? Like, is that the difference, that he wouldn't accept that Biden would take office? I mean, Biden took office. The military didn't have to force Donald Trump out of office. So there's not really a difference like they seem to be implying. in this regard. I mean, you say that she accepted that Kemp would take office, but then also she was filing lawsuits. That's a legal action. Donald Trump also took legal actions after his election, you know. He had his lawyers out there pushing voter fraud claims. Think what you may of those. It's similar in a sense. It's a legal action. In and of itself, it is not illegal. Unless you want to say that, like Donald Trump, well, let's assume that his motive was that he knew it was a fair election, but still he was going to claim that it wasn't anyways, and therefore it was conspiratorial, and he was part of a criminal enterprise, and they should all be locked up, everyone who participated in the attempt to overturn the election. But in her case, it's somehow different? I'm not so sure it is. A federal judge in late September 2022 ruled against Abrams' claims. Despite this history, in a rematch in 2022, Abrams conceded to Kemp in Georgia's gubernatorial race after projections put her Republican opponent ahead. So maybe I read that wrong. So I guess her previous election was ruled upon by the federal judge just before the second election. Am I reading that correctly? Because it says late September of 2022, the federal judge ruled against her claims. But then that was just before her 2022 election, which she lost. But projections put her Republican opponent ahead. So, though D.C. politicians preferred her at that point, after she put up such a fight, people of her state, voters in her state, did not favor her. She did not win them over by claiming that the election was stolen. Maybe that's a note that Donald Trump should take, because he seems to think that he's going to gain voters by claiming for years that the election was stolen from him. Maybe it just doesn't work that way. Or for Carrie Lake, same logic could apply. I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see what happens. How does this differ from Trump? Abrams' refusal to concede and attempts to challenge the results are clearly distinct from the indictment that Trump is facing. There was no evidence that Abrams attempted to interfere with the outcome of the gubernatorial election, as it is alleged that Trump and his co-conspirators might have. As it is alleged that Trump and his co-conspirators might have. Okay, but in her case, someone could argue that she might have. Someone could allege that she might have. So they say that there is a distinct difference between the two indictments. But it's only because of what might have happened. Okay. It sounds to me like people are just speculating a lot differently for one person than they are for the other. I think both Trump and Abrams are annoying, just so you know. But people just aren't keeping that same energy. Two-tier justice system seems to be. Trump, crucially, is not facing charges for lying, but conspiring to change the result of the election through actions which can be taken legally unless they're taken dishonestly, therefore meaning that it is all based upon the speculation that he was lying. Okay, because conspiring starts in the mind. That word has motive written all over it. So the motive only exists if Trump was lying. Unless you want to say that simply contesting the results of an election is illegal in and of itself, which couldn't be the case, couldn't possibly be the case, since Democrats also did that in the past, even in presidential elections, whether in the case of Hillary Clinton or in the case of Al Gore. Furthermore, Abrams' lack of concession over the 2018 vote is not an indictable offense, just as Trump's refusal to concede in the 2020 presidential race is not. Wait, what? Legal scholar Richard Briffault told Newsweek that Abrams' claim of unfairness was based on a massive purge of voters who hadn't voted in recent elections, as well as obstacles to the registration of new voters, which somehow didn't prevent, again, an unprecedented amount of voters from voting. As I understand it, Abrams said she would have won a fairly conducted election and claimed that various things her opponent, Kemp, then the Georgia Secretary of State, did in terms of election results or rules and procedures that made it harder for supporters to vote were unfair. And she would have won if he hadn't manipulated the rules, Briffault said. So if someone heard what she said and went to take violent action against Brian Kemp, would that mean she had incited them? As we are supposed to believe that Donald Trump was inciting the protesters turned rioters of January 6th, even though he told them to march peacefully and patriotically? Huh. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. And by the way, I don't promote any violence. Unlike Trump, I don't think she ever claimed she actually won the election that was held. What? And she never did anything illegal to overturn the outcome. My goodness. She never claimed she actually won the election? Should I one more time return to this compilation of clips and play a little bit more? We're only 1 minute 30 seconds into this 5 minute 20-second compilation of her claiming that the election was stolen from her.
If it looks like it's rigged, it probably is.
We've been raised to believe that it is invalid, in fact it's uncouth to call the question. That if you want to run for office again, you've got to concede the election so that everyone knows you're a good sport. I'm not.
Okay, so that right there was her saying that she was not going to concede the election. So people are making all kinds of excuses for her because they are, even more biased than I am, just in the opposite direction. At least I'm trying to be reasonable here. Unlike Trump, I don't think she ever claimed she actually won the election that was held, and she never did anything illegal to overturn the outcome. But if legality is determined based upon motive or speculated motive, then can I just subjectively say that I disagree with you? Lock her up! Nah, I'm not going to stoop that low. Never going to raise the standards by stooping low. Abrams is not the only candidate to have spoken out or made outspoken claims about the circumstances of her election result. After the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton kept referring to Donald Trump as an illegitimate president, claiming he knew he stole the contest, reported the Washington Post. Again, Clinton did not attempt to overturn the results, so there wouldn't be grounds for indictment there either. Crucially, however, Abrams' actions did not attract the potential for charges that Fulton County DA Fannie Willis' office has found in Trump's case. Alright, so that's the end of the article. But lastly, when they speak of Hillary Clinton, I'm not saying that she should be locked up. I don't think Donald Trump should have ever made that argument in the first place, unless he was actually going to back it up, which would have, in a sense, been unconstitutional for him to do as a president, for him to do a reverse pardon and try to lock her up. But I don't know if it's 100% fair and square to say that he took illegal actions and they didn't. I mean, he took actions, or at least attempted to. So did his lawyers, some of his advisors, some of the experts whom he trusted. But it all falls back on what their motive was, whether the motive was conspiratorial or not. And to this day, to my knowledge, no one has proven that he was actually lying. So he could be as ignorant and arrogant as possible and still be pursuing legal matters. In fact, it seems to me that, sure, he was pressuring Mike Pence to hold up the certification process, but he was doing so specifically because he wanted it to return to the courts and become a legal matter. He wanted to win in the courts. He wanted to prove this stuff that I don't necessarily think is provable. But when you say in a fact check article, it says right here at the top of this article that it's a fact check, that the difference is that he acted illegally, and your only evidence of him acting illegally are claims within indictments where he hasn't even been proven guilty in a court of law yet. And it's claims that are based upon the notion that he was conspiring simply because he was lying. It's just not holding much water for me. You know, they all acted a little bit differently because Stacey Abrams also took legal action in the form of a lawsuit. A little bit different than in Donald Trump's case, but still, you can't act as though, you can't act however you want to act. But I'll suggest that you not act as though Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams' situations are the exact same, because they're not either. Because Hillary Clinton, she just went around on her media tour. Still to this day, she claims that Trump was an illegitimate president. She was on Rachel Maddow's show on MSNBC just the other day, laughing about Donald Trump being indicted again, while simultaneously stating that she was very sad that it was happening. And she was talking about the destruction of democracy and claims of stolen elections. And they were agreeing on this as though they haven't been claiming themselves that Russian collusion changed the results in the election, and that Donald Trump colluded with Russians and therefore stole the election from her. But this is how they see things when it comes to their fellow Democrats. This right here. Glorious. Sugar-coated. In Donald Trump's case, not so much. There is a double standard. There is a two-tier justice system in that sense. Am I saying that Donald Trump is innocent across the board? No. But it's clear. It's clear that he is being prosecuted politically. So that's what I have to say for today. Thanks for watching. Keep in touch, keep in tune. New content is coming soon. Feel free to disagree with me on anything I said. Let me know in the comments below what you think, what you know. Sorry I'm losing my voice a little bit. Peace.